Want to welcome in David from the Hoops Southbound Podcast. David, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great. We're just a few days away from basketball getting started. It's big time over on my show right now. I've got like a couple more pieces of preseason content to put together right now, and it's just this is my favorite time of year. This is my favorite sport. I know everybody's big on football in the SEC, but I get super excited once it's time for tip off on November 4th.
So, wanted to get you guys on here to talk basketball because we're consumed with football here in Knoxville right now.
Of course, I
Arkan
mean, when you got a good team, you got to be, right?
so you're an Arkansas fan, disclaimer, and Arkansas's still kind of hanging around. Got a big one this weekend with Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin coming to town. So I'm trying to figure out who to pick in that game. I think Ole Miss is favored 6.5, but that Arkansas, man, if they get hot offensively, watch out.
I don't know what it is about Ole Miss. They can have by far the better team on paper, but for some reason we tend to play them well. So that one's going to be exciting here for sure. I'll probably flip a coin, and that'll be the best guess you can give me on how that game's going
Yeah.
to go. But as a Razorback fan, I have to say, like, I thought this team might end up going 4-8 or 5-7 this season. So the fact we're only one win away from a bowl game right now just puts me in a better place as a football fan for sure. But that's going to be a fun one on Saturday.
Yeah, they've definitely exceeded expectations, that's for sure. But um, wanted to talk some basketball real quick, get the Tennessee fans that listen to our show kind of caught up. Basketball starts here in Knoxville next Monday. Tennessee hosts Gardner Webb at Thompson Bowling Arena. We don't call it the Food City Center, even though Food City's paying us a bunch of money to put their logo on the outside of the arena. But Tennessee actually had their first, well, it's not really a game, but exhibition game this past Sunday. I went to it, hosted number 17, Indiana. Tennessee lost 66-62. And pretty much when I go to a Tennessee game, I obviously want Tennessee to win. This is the first Tennessee sporting event I've been to in a long time where I was just watching it, not worried about if Tennessee won or lost. It didn't matter. It was kind of weird to me. I know didn't Arkansas played Kansas recently,
We play
correct?
Kansas. Yeah, we play
So
Kansas on Friday. Yeah.
it was weird. My dad and I were at the game, and I looked over at the scores table, like right in the middle of game action. And Coach Woodson for Indiana, Coach Barnes for Tennessee were just at half court talking to each other. And I was like, I looked at my dad and I said, when do you ever see that in a college basketball game? Just two coaches just chatting it up at half court. It's just odd. It was weird to me to see that, but
The exhibition
refreshing.
games just crack open something just totally different where coaches are a little bit more hands-on or more personable with each other at that time. It's not as high stress. They definitely view it kind of differently. I know a little bit with watching the confession, I was doing some deer hunting. But like when when I got back from my stand and I was watching the Kansas Arkansas game, Bill Self, Calipari, same thing. Very much just not at full blown coach mode, more in practice mode and getting those mindsets going on and just kind of having conversations about like situations and things like that as well. So it's a different feel this time of year with the exhibition, but I like the fact that we're getting to see better teams and not so much, hey, let's go play UT Tyler, like or some Division two team out there.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee Lady Vols were playing Carson Newman, which is a small Division II school right outside of Knoxville tonight. So I'm not sure what they get out of that, but I really like these exhibition that the men's side is doing. Tennessee went to Michigan State last year. It was the coming out party of Dalton Knecht. Um, hosted Indiana this year. Obviously, like I said, Sunday lost by 4. Just a couple takeaways on my end. Okpara from Ohio, transfer from Ohio State for Tennessee, really physical inside defensively. Rim protection is going to increase for Tennessee this year with him underneath and several others. But was really impressed by Okpara, his physicality defensively, and he had some offense that I wasn't expecting. It was really hard to get a gauge on what Tennessee may be like. They played so many different combos. I don't know what Arkansas did and Kansas. I'm sure they did something similar. Indiana really didn't do much of that. They played a much smaller rotation. Tennessee was playing players that haven't played much of all with each other and probably won't play much with each other during the season. But I mean, that's what you get in these exhibition games. So you can't read a lot into it, but it was kind of cool to see some of the new faces. and what they may look like. But the big one for me on my end was Okpara, I believe that's how you say his name, transfer from Ohio State, good rebounder, good rim protector. Um, but Tennessee looks a lot different this year without Dalton Knecht, without Vescovy, without Josiah Jordan James. What, from an outsider looking in, what's your thoughts on what Tennessee may look like this year without those three? Because it's a different era for Tennessee now.
Yeah, watching some of the game and kind of also looking at the numbers from it in that game. One thing I do think that everyone's going to be familiar with is that we can expect Tennessee to continue to be a good defensive team. I do think that's going to be a cornerstone that's still going to be there this season. Felix Okpara, as you were mentioning, I love the physicality this kid has. I think that a lot of you guys in Tennessee are going to like what he has to offer. He has a very different game from what Jonas Adu has. And the physicality should be absolutely there for them. He does not shy away from contact, and that's one thing that Ohio State fans really liked about him last season. One thing I do want to note, you were talking about the different look. I know Tennessee didn't have the greatest night shooting the basketball in that exhibition game, but I don't want anybody to panic about that because when I look at the numbers and I see the potential in this team, there's a lot of guys on this team who can shoot. I mean, 1 through 4, you got guys who can shoot on this team on possible rotations. The guy Ziegler was 34% last year. You're also talking about Meshack shooting close to 36, that magic number that we're all looking for from three for high end teams. Then Darling Stone DeBar is also a really good shooter. He was close to 40% last season. And then Igor Milicic Jr. was also another player who shot 37. So you've got a well rounded team that I don't think you have to go necessarily to a guy like a Dalton Knecht to go find offense. Now that's fingers crossed because we said that a little bit last year when we were talking about Santiago Vescovi. We kept going all the time like, please start playing like you did the year prior over and over again. But overall, there should be plenty of scoring options on this team. Now, you're talking about a new look. A player I'm really excited about is Chaz Lanier coming out for Tennessee. I think this kid has a ton of potential and is someone that can really, it might take a minute, but he can really break out at some point as time goes on. He did some NBA workouts this offseason, got some feedback from them, came back to college. This kid put up 19.7 points per game there at North Florida, shot over 40% or 44% from the floor from three and over 51% from the field. So, kid I really, really like, and I hope that it comes together for him because he's definitely a high potential player. But when you're talking about that new look, also, the other thing I just really take away from this is there are 6 returners on this team, but 3 of them saw very limited minutes on the returners, and it's going to be a grow up phase for them. JP Estrella, Cameron Carr, Cade Phillips. I really want to see those kids grow for Tennessee this year. But yeah, they didn't see, they saw a lot of garbage time minutes last year, or they saw kind of late game situations or a minute or two here and there to sub a player out for when they were in foul trouble or something like that. I really want to see these kids jump up and have a great season this year. That's really my hope for them.
Yeah, you talked about Lanier. He really struggled from the field in this game. We've heard through here locally through media watching practice during the preseason that he has been pretty good shooting the basketball. Listening to Tennessee after the game, Rick Barnes wasn't concerned. People analyzing the game weren't concerned. He was getting a lot of open looks. He just could not get anything to fall. But I'm gonna be honest, no one on either team in that game shot the ball very well at all. We got there a little bit late, and I swear the score was 11-9 for like 10 minutes. It was rough. That's what you get with Tennessee a lot of times, and Indiana's in the Big Ten. They play a lot of defense. But I thought Tennessee, nothing has let up in this game from last year defensively. I think Tennessee's probably going to be top 5, top 10 again defensively, but it may take them a little bit to gel offensively. Like you said, there is a lot of new players on the floor, not necessarily new to the program, but they just didn't get a ton of playing time. The biggest one is Meshack. I mean, he played a lot of meaningful minutes last year for Tennessee. He's back. But Cade Phillips played sparingly. JP Estrella played very sparingly. So you've got a lot of guys that are playing a lot of minutes, that are going to play a lot of minutes with each other this year that haven't done that before. And that's kind of I don't want to say Tennessee's starting over, but it's kind of a new era turnover for Tennessee.
It is for sure. And like I said, it's not anything to raise alarm bells. I do want to comment on the shooting. The shooting for Tennessee shouldn't be a concern because we know they're all better shooters on this roster. Indiana's got a different story than what Tennessee had in that game. Indiana is, I called them one on one episode that we did this preseason for some team that's facing them. I think it's South Carolina. They're the best team. They're the best team in college basketball that can't shoot.
Yeah.
They have no outside shooting. It's insane, and everyone's been talking about this. How did you get this many good transfers on that Indiana team with a complete inability to shoot? And I think those problems got amplified when they faced a good defense against Tennessee in that exhibition game, and it just made the problem that much worse. So like that's kind of what I expected for Indiana. For Tennessee, yeah, I didn't expect them not to shoot as poorly as they did, but you're right. The rotation is just it's brand new. And you got rotation players coming back like Jemai Mashak. And when I look at Tennessee, and one of the big things that Evan Mia did his roster research on is playing time retention for building good rosters. And Tennessee returned 83.1 minutes per game between six players. That kind of immediately tells you when you do the math there that that's a lot of rotation going on. And you're talking about Jordan Gainey and Mashak in this team who weren't players who saw 25 minutes a game. That's not who they were last year. So they got roles to fill there as well. But I do think between the combination of them having to raise their game for this senior season that they're in, and then the transfers you got, this team may take a second to come together, but it should click. There's a lot of guys who are more than capable of playing into those roles.
Yeah. It probably good to get a game like this in on Saturday.
Get some
Indiana's
tape.
a yeah, and Indiana's got a pretty physical front line too.
They
I
do.
mean, Umar Ballo, I totally forgot he was there until I heard his name announced over the public address system Saturday. I was like, oh yeah, forgot he was there. But yeah, that was a good challenge for Tennessee. I thought both teams will probably end up benefiting from it, but I typical overreaction. There was people on social media overreacting to a game that doesn't count, where they did things that they normally won't do. But that's typical fandom, I guess. I'm sure Arkansas and Kansas fans were the same boat.
I'm sure they were. And a year ago, I was much in the same boat after we played Purdue, and I thought we looked pretty darn good. Now, granted, I do think that there was some off the court stuff going in there because I don't know how a team could be that bad. But yeah, no, these games, you don't need to look at them that way. Coaches are trying different things. They're looking at things a little bit differently throughout the course, and trying to figure out the things they want to figure out that they can't get figured out in practice. So don't overreact is the message to Tennessee fans when it comes to an exhibition basketball game.
So looking at the SEC, it looks totally different this year. You've got Texas, Oklahoma in. Does that upset the hierarchy any of this conference, or are we still going to look at your same Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas type teams up at the top?
I think this year is a little bit different. Not drastically because so it's a little bit different than what football. Our expectation for like what 10 for Texas and Oklahoma when they came in, we kind of all expected Texas to be a good team and disrupt the hierarchy. Texas and Oklahoma aren't quite that this year in basketball. Now, I do expect at some point these two teams to make some noise in college in SEC basketball, but Oklahoma is probably they have a ceiling that's similar to last year's South Carolina team because they have players who can shoot, but they've also probably got one of the least talented on paper rosters in the SEC. They're really just look like a team that's going to end up somewhere near the bottom when you kind of look at what everybody's saying about them and the look that they kind of have to them. There's a lot of rotation players in that Oklahoma team. So I don't necessarily think this is going to be a great year for Oklahoma basketball here in year one for them. They've also got a tougher schedule than what Texas has. And then for Texas, I think they're going to be right there. They're going to be in the mix of some of the NCAA tournament teams when it comes to the SEC, but I don't think necessarily they're going to be a team that's going to be challenging for the SEC title unless their front court's a lot better than what everyone's thinking. Their back court's really, really good. They have some outstanding guards this team can shoot, but there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be able to, with their front court depth, beat them down low throughout the course of this season. So I think that Texas, not Tennessee, I don't know which UT I said there a second ago, but I'm trying to
I think we assume Texas, but
yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, but with
we call them UT Junior here.
yeah, absolutely, because Davy Crockett came to Texas.
Yes.
But overall, like for their front court, when you look at this team, or their back court, when you look at this team, they got guys who can shoot like crazy, pass like crazy. Jordan Pope's a really good basketball player. Jason Kent's a really good basketball player. Tremont Mark was one of the highest scorers in the SEC when he played for Arkansas last year. He transferred to Texas. And then they got Trey Johnson, who's the best freshman coming to the SEC, who's going to play a significant role in that backcourt for them. So there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be able to bully them in the front court, but they can match and play anybody in the back court. So I think they're just going to be right there in that 6, 7, 8, 9 range. And I know that sounds like deeper numbers when we talk about a 14 team conference, but we're adding two more. So that's right there in that middle of the pack kind of group is where I think Texas is going to be this year.
What's a team that may be flying under the radar in the conference that we
Um,
don't hear a lot about?
Drastic dark horse, Missouri. They have put
Oh.
together a heck of a recruiting job and a portal class. Now, there's a lot of talk about this team being like 13, 14 in the conference and toward the bottom. I think they're super under the radar with how talented this is. They brought in one of the best freshman classes in the country and also one of the best transfer classes. When you talk about guys like or Jacob Cruz, you're also talking about Mark Mitchell coming from Duke, and Marquise Warwick, who's another good player from the mid-major level, and then Honor Boating, who's from my neck of the woods, from Arkansas. He comes in as one of the best freshmen in the country coming in. He's got NBA potential. He's going to be in this freshman class, and they really addressed the thing that has just sucked for Missouri, even in their good year 2 years ago. Their front court has been an issue for them, and they full-fledged addressed that. And they got in some really good, talented players. I think what's happening for Missouri is that 0-18 record last year is just it's like an anchor for them, and everyone's kind of just perceiving them, and they're questioning that first year whether it's was more Kobe Brown or was it more Dennis Gates. And that's kind of the question right now. If you believe that Dennis Gates was the reason for their success that first year, you should really like this Missouri team. If you think Dennis Gates was the problem for year two, and that's why that team never got off the ground, then you probably are kind of fading them a little bit. So I think Missouri is a team that's super under the radar. And then Maddie really likes Georgia on my show, and I tend to agree with her. John Rothstein also really likes Georgia. There's 4 and 5 star talent players all over this team. What's going to be kind of the catalyst for them to see how high they can actually rise is that they're super inexperienced. This is unbelievably young. This is an unbelievably young team. I believe they have the least amount of NCAA tournament minutes played in the entire conference, 66 on this roster altogether. But they also got some good transfers in RJ Godfrey and Tyron Lawrence, who used to play at Vanderbilt. So they got some good players. This team could easily find themselves in the bubble conversation this season.
So we've talked about teams, who's a player outside of let's say outside of Tennessee, who's a player to watch?
A player to watch outside of Tennessee this season, if you're looking for who's going to be one of the best players in the conference, you're talking Mark Sears, coming back to college again this year, 21.5 points per game, already getting national attention for Player of the Year. Then Janai Broom over at Auburn is still going to be a player that a lot of people are going to be watching this year. Wade Taylor, is another player that's going to be talked about a lot this season over at Texas A&M. And then Arkansas's Janelle Davis is another player. Those guys all got on CBS's All-American list, preseason All-American list this year. Nelly Davis was one of the best transfers in the country this season. He had kind of a rough game against Kansas, but my understanding, he's coming back from a sort of a wrist injury, so I don't think he was 100% healthy in this game. And like a lot of transfers, it may take a minute for him to click as well. But those are kind of the players that we're looking at. As far as breakout players go, Alex Condon on Florida is one to keep an eye on this season. Their front court's had a lot of big changes, and Alex Condon's been playing a lot of international ball this offseason. He's gotten stronger physically with coming from the reports from there in Florida. He's worked on his game a lot more to add a little bit more versatility to it and stretchability. To me, he might be a big sophomore breakout candidate this year.
So I've seen projections. I mean, I'm already looking at possible NCAA tournament. I know you can't really read anything into it. There's no games being played right now officially. I, there's people projecting the SEC to get 10, 11 teams in the tournament. Is that possible?
Absolutely. So absolutely, there was a heavy investment this transfer portal cycle. Spending that football money, man. That's what it's good for, and it's there for in these NIL collectives. The SEC and the Big 12 really were aggressive this portal cycle, getting the best talent you can possibly find. You will find when you go through and you look at like all the big indexes and roster items on these teams across the SEC, they're checking a lot of boxes on high potential teams. There could be a team this season. This is how deep this conference is. There could be a team who finishes outside the top six in the SEC conference standings this year that might make a Final Four run. There's that many good teams in this conference this year. Additionally, one of the big changes with the Pac-12 no longer existing, the Pac-12's automatic bid spot is now up for grabs across college basketball. So there's an additional open spot, and the Pac-12 used to get 2 to 3 teams in the NCAA tournament. So those are going to go somewhere to some other conference. And then 10 and 11's happened in the past. The record is 11, done by the Big East when they did it. And that was back when they were a much larger conference and they had a bunch of good basketball teams. I think that was the same year they had 2 number 1 seeds coming out of there. The SEC looks like a conference with how many good teams are put together and how many high potential teams there are here. You're going to have almost every night a chance to get a quality win, and that's going to help a lot of teams' resumes. And then there's talents that's really going to help the indexes and the analytics and metrics and the net rating of each and every one of these teams. When it comes to Selection Sunday, we should see a lot of SEC teams being weighed toward the top. And I really do think the SEC's got a chance to tie the record this season.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. So what you're saying is Tennessee fans and fans across the SEC shouldn't freak out if they lose a few games this year because
No,
it's going to be a gauntlet.
I think the number is going to be incredibly similar to what it was last year when Tennessee won the regular season. I think it's going to take 13, 14 wins. And that's because I really think a lot of teams are going to have some losses coming off their road trips. Alabama right now is being talked about as the SEC favorite to win it all this year. The thing with Alabama is they have probably the hardest dang road schedule in the SEC. They got to go play, I mean, almost every good team in their house. They don't get it in Coleman. And I think their hardest home game is against Florida, who's still a good team, but most their home games are going to be against like LSU, who's projected toward the bottom of the conference. Vanderbilt's coming to their house. There's several teams that you would not expect. Or who you would really normally want to face at home to get a quality win at. And then Alabama's on the road playing everybody who's good. So it's going to be a rough road for them. They're going to take some losses. Tennessee's going to take some losses somewhere. There's no way someone goes through this conference just completely unscathed. They may have 4 or 5 wins for that number 1 spot, and I expect some log jams in certain places throughout the standings this season.
So standings, where I'll get your champ, but where do the Vols finish? I know where you all have projected, you and Maddie have projected the Vols to finish because I watched your show. But where do you guys think Tennessee will finish, and who's the champ of the SEC during the regular season? I'm not worried about the tournament.
Yeah, we both had Alabama. Um, it's a weird year as far as that goes. I would say there's like a feeling of like 60% chance, if I'm to make some arbitrary number about it, that Alabama wins the conference. It doesn't necessarily feel like a pick the year field year just because of how good that team is, but there's some really good candidates out there. And I've got Tennessee in my rankings number 3 because there are things that need to come together for them. Maddie likes the talent more on Tennessee than Auburn, who's my number 2 team. So she has Tennessee number 2. And I think that defense can be very helpful for them as well. And like I said, I think the offense can be spread out a little bit more on this Tennessee team than it was last year. So I do agree with I get the feeling with her that Tennessee should finish somewhere near the top of the SEC. It would be surprising to me if they finish outside the top 6. I do think that they're one of the better teams here. And if they did finish outside the top 6, to me, it would be like a situation where the team didn't come together, but I'd still have them as a tournament team as a floor standing.
Yeah, I think I looked the other day. Lenardi has Tennessee as a 4 seed right now, which again
Which
you
is
can't put.
appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't put a whole lot of stock into that. I was looking at Ken Palm too before we got on here, and I pulled it up here again. Tennessee. Some people on our show hate it that I talk about Ken Palm. Some may love it. I like analytics, but Tennessee comes in at 13 here in the preseason. Notes from the SEC, you've got Auburn at 3, Alabama at 4, Texas at 18, Texas A&M at 16 in the top 20 from the SEC. So, Tennessee's right there in the mix nationally. It sounds to me like they're going to be in the mix in the conference, but this thing is going to be a grind all year long. I mean, last year was a grind. You had South Carolina pop up out of nowhere, and Tennessee had to go over there to their place, and it was a tough one. Tennessee answered the bell, but then you talk about Missouri. They went 0-18, but Tennessee had to fight and claw at Missouri to win that game. So it's never really a night off in this conference.
There will be no nights off, and I'm telling you that this is going to be one of the most entertaining years we've had in this conference. I will say with Kim Palm, one thing that this early in the season is that it uses data. If for any of the viewers who are into Kim Palm, it uses data from the previous 5 seasons at this point in the season to kind of help make those, and then they base it off of what the roster looks like. So when I look at Tennessee, they're put there very appropriately, in my opinion. Like, I do think that they're a top 15 team, and I do think that's right. But like teams like Texas, I don't expect them to finish top 20 in Ken Palm. I don't expect that to happen. There's also some other teams in that Ken Palm ranking, like for instance Kentucky. I don't necessarily think they're going to finish 43
Yeah.
in Ken Palm. I think they should finish a little bit higher based on Mark Pope's track record. So it's going to be an absolute fight. I know Tennessee fans don't like Kentucky, and you guys hope that that Ken Palm rating comes true, but I
Yeah.
do expect them to be you know, better or than that
Yeah.
rating is right now.
And I mean, they've got to be better than that. They're Kentucky, and they've got, even though John Calipari's not there anymore, they've still got some talent on that roster. And I think Mark Pope's a good coach, so we'll see what he can do.
Absolutely. And they're kind of a sleeper team in the SEC as well this year. I don't know if they're going to just set the world on fire, but I do think a lot of teams are going to hate playing them this season with the way that Pope likes to run his offense. It's just going to be something that we're not accustomed to seeing a lot of. They play just a very, very funky, weird style of basketball that we just haven't gotten acquainted with, but they play it a lot over in Europe, and it creates a lot of 3-point opportunities, and they got a lot of guys who can shoot 3-pointers.
Well, it's going to be exciting. I mean, it's hard to believe basketball is here. I know Tennessee's right in the middle here in football of a playoff hunt. I don't want to call it a playoff run, but they're in the hunt for the playoffs. And we've got Kentucky this weekend, but right after that on Monday, it's time for basketball to crank up, and then we're in it till March, hopefully. So I'm excited about it. I hope our listeners are. I know you guys in Arkansas are excited. We didn't even talk about our friend Jonas Adu, who left Tennessee to go to Arkansas. It actually was kind of funny. I think he got on somebody's Instagram live earlier in the summer and was like, "Man, I miss Tennessee." Don't read too much into that, but what's the vibe? What's the word around Adu going to Arkansas from UT?
There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of excitement. That ending playing with Zach Edey is anybody's not going to look great against Zach Edey, but like honestly, there's a lot of excitement here for for Jonas Adu's ability to play basketball. We definitely think on here on the Arkansas side that he's going to be a featured player on this team and someone we're going to expect a lot of minutes from. So he should get ample playing time. I haven't heard much on the injury situation that kept him out. Cal's kind of not talking about that, which I've been told 1,000 times from Kentucky fans, just kind of get used to that. But like, we haven't heard much about like what exactly and how much time he's going to miss, if he's going to miss any at all. So that's kind of, he did miss that game on Friday against Kansas, but we're very excited for what he can do and the combination that having someone who is a very good inside player with two number fours that can also sub in and out at five, stretch the floor, and the kind of versatility he brings to the back to the front court is really exciting. So
I
we definitely
was
like the Jonas Adu situation.
I loved Adu when he was here. I was crushed when he struggled against Zach Edey. A lot of people struggled against Zach Edey. And it stunk because a lot of people around here feel like he transferred because he got very limited playing time in that game in the second. He was just very ineffective. And Can't blame Rick Barnes for doing it. I don't think there's any ill will between Tennessee and Jonas Adu. I know some fans here in Knoxville probably have a lot of ill will toward him. I don't care one way or another. I wish him well, but when we play, I hope we beat the heck out of him. I mean, he was a guy I vouched for 3 years when he was here. He got progressively better, pretty highly recruited player coming here, and he got progressively better as he went along. And I kept saying, just wait till next year when he's a senior, and he's going to be Tennessee's top option. Obviously, now we don't get to see that. You all do, but disappointed he left, but still a great player, great pickup for you all.
Well, we're definitely excited to have him. I'm definitely there with you. Jonas Adu has been a player I've liked for a while. Talking to us and coming on our show and listening to our show, how much we talked about Jonas Adu last season, and just kind of some of the deep dive numbers when you jump into him, what he provides. The numbers are great, and people can get upset about that NCAA tournament run and some of the performances he had, but he 100% was going against some of the best centers in college basketball there. He had to play Ryan Kalkbrenner, who is in the Player of the Year conversation this season, both in the Big East and the national conversation, and then the next game turn around and go play Zach Edey. He did not have an easy run when it came
Right.
to who he was facing in that front court the last couple of games. But Felix Okpara is definitely somebody I think you guys should be 100% excited about, and hopefully he sticks around. He's still fairly young, if I remember right.
I
Isn't he only a junior? So he should
think,
be around for the next 2 years and be a very
yeah.
exciting player for y'all.
Right. I think he's got 2 years of eligibility left. So hopefully he sticks around and gives us something to root for him about. So tell us where we can find Hoops Southbound at. I watch these guys every week. They're basically, if you don't know what the show is, they talk about SEC basketball. They'll sprinkle in a little national talk, but it's mainly SEC basketball during the season. Y'all pretty much break down each team, who they played last week, what's going on. But tell us where we can find you all and what y'all show's about.
Yeah, so we primarily talk about SEC basketball, like you were saying. That is the main mission. We do talk about some other stuff, just what's happening around college basketball, and to sprinkle in some interesting stuff every now and then. But yeah, we talk about every team, break down the biggest games during the week. We during the non-conference schedule, we'll be talking about almost every power conference versus SEC matchup that we have going on, including some major teams also, like when Kentucky plays Gonzaga. We'll talk about that. Tennessee's playing Louisville here very soon. Now you already know that's on our upcoming episode that we'll be doing this week. So we'll be talking about that Tennessee Louisville game on November for the November night slate. So we talk about each and every team. We break it down. We're talking about what they have in front of them, what the players are looking at, breaking down matchups. We even do some whiteboard segments every now and then to break down the way a team plays, and then look deep dive into some of the numbers and things like that that's out there. And then we also break down bracketology as well. Right now on our channel, we have a ton, and I mean a ton of preseason content that I have been working like crazy to get out there. So right now, what you can do if you're a Tennessee fan, you can watch our season preview on the Tennessee Volunteers. We go through the entire roster, the schedule, everything, go through some of the expectations and big storylines right now with Tennessee basketball. Then you can also check out our video in our series, The Portal, which we broke down Tennessee's entire transfer portal class, going through each player and talking about their game, how they fit into this team, and kind of our expectations for them throughout the season. So there's a ton of content over there for your Tennessee Volunteer fans. You can also check out some other team stuff, like who are the best 15 freshmen coming into the SEC, watch some of their highlights and their scouting report. Me and Maddie kind of broke down on that as well. And then our SEC season preview should be coming out on tomorrow morning. It's coming out the 31st. So depending on when this episode comes out for you guys here on Section YY8. But yeah, 31st, our full SEC preview comes down, and we're talking a ton of players on that one this week. So find us at Hoops Southbound pretty much anywhere on social media. We're there, but we do a lot of content that's on the YouTube channel. So just go into YouTube, look up Hoops Southbound. I promise you'll find us eventually.
Yeah, just type in Hoops Southbound and it pops up. I know David talked about talking about all the non-conference games that SEC teams play. He mentioned Louisville. Tennessee's got them on November 9th, next Saturday. They're going to play Virginia in the Bahamas in the let's see, that's the Continental
Bahamar.
Tire Baha Mar Championship. Could play either St. John's or Baylor also. Then they've got Syracuse and Thompson Bowling early December. We go to Madison Square Garden for the Jimmy V Classic against Miami. They go to Champaign versus Illinois, which should be an interesting matchup. And then you get into SEC play after that. But they'll
And
break
then we'll talk
all of
about
that.
everybody nonstop.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So, David, I appreciate it. If you guys aren't watching them, give them a listen. But David, appreciate you guys coming on.
Absolutely glad to be here.